All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to Residency Branding. As she said, I'm Andrea Ferrari.
I'm Abra Fan.
And I'm Gene Hearn.
We all have different backgrounds in branding. My background prior to medical school was in some nonprofit management.
As you heard, my background is in quality and safety, so more from a process improvement standpoint in the branding.
And I actually have no formal training in branding whatsoever, but I was an APD or NPD for about 15 years, and I'm currently the Vice Chair of Education, and I have maybe some experience in it.
And so we all have a little bit of experience we brought. We did a little bit of research. Most of our literature comes from the corporate and commercial world. There really doesn't exist any literature in residency branding, so if anyone's looking for a niche, it's available for you. We have no disclosures, and I want to emphasize we're going to use some brands as examples in this talk, and our only vested interest in them is that they serve as good examples. We're going to start by talking about what branding is. We're going to talk about some key components to successful branding. We're going to talk about something that I like to call micro-branding, and along the way, we're going to try and give you some tools to use that will make it feasible for you to see how you can take this back to your programs.
Okay. So, when you see this picture, what comes to mind? This, by the way, is the very first picture that you click on when you click on My Residency's resident page. So if you think of branding, what are the things that jump out at you from this picture? Just shout them out. Diversity, good. What else? Wellness. Fun. What else? Give me some negatives. There's some negatives here, right? Maybe, maybe not. There's alcohol, which is a little strange. Like there's a wine glass. Like, oh, okay. But diversity, fun, inclusion, wellness, people are smiling, they're happy. And I think those are all really interesting things. But there may be some negative things also that you have to be careful about when you talk about branding, and when you talk about focusing what your plan is.
So I want you guys just to take a minute or two to think about maybe 4 or 5 things that your residency is known for. If you guys are sitting in groups with your co-residents, you guys can kind of do this together. But just take a minute, write them down on some scratch paper, and then we'll have maybe 1 or 2 groups share.
That's pretty funny to me. Like, introduced us all, and we're like, okay, what do we do? I know, it's really good.
Okay, 30 more seconds. All right. So who has a loud voice and wants to share? Somebody got called out. Is there a Rob in the audience that would like to share the 4 things, 3 or 4 or 5 things that their residency is known for?
Sure.
Excellent.
I think we're known for relatively large patient volumes, so getting a lot of experience when you're in the ER. I think we're known as like kind of an outdoors place that ER people all over are, but the ski cabin that we share among our residency, and we want everyone to know that yes, there's a lot of rigor on shift, but we have kind of a lot of ways to unwind that you may not get all over the country. I think that's another thing. One of the other things that I think we're known for is just being one of the older programs, and I think that's a good thing. ER's not that old, but we were around since the 70s, and I think that's something that we're all kind of proud of in our program. And unfortunately, I know you said like around 4, but we kind of topped off at 3. Changed that a little bit.
I think in the past, we're known for malignancy, but I think we've been able to determine that a little bit. and really turn that into a positive. We're known for rigor and for turning out excellent clinical docs.
We are no longer malignant.
No longer malignant is a
Right,
good
no longer
brand.
malignant. I like
That's
that.
good. All right.
Okay, so I think at my program, something if you asked any resident that we would talk about is we're really proud of being clinical monsters. And for us, a clinical monster doesn't just mean that we have an exceptional breadth, depth, experience, knowledge base, and that we get to go do sexy procedures like ED thoracotomies, but it's also about doing a lot of the everyday mundane things for our patients so that we know we can take care of them anywhere with any resources available to us. So that usually means placing a lot of IVs, drawing some labs, taking them to the lab, transporting our patients, doing EKGs. I've subbed for a 1-to-1 before. Foley. So, this has arisen out of a need for us to be able to serve our patients at the level of quality we think our patients deserve. And I ponder the question, especially when I'm thinking about branding, if you took our ED tomorrow and you placed it in ABEM General, that magical hospital of the oral boards where everything happens just because you asked for it and it happens very quickly, would our residents still come out of our program with this skill set? Would we still be known for that if we worked at a hospital where the need was no longer there? And the point I want you to take away from this is that great brands choose. They pick what they want to be, and regardless of the environment, they're going to make sure that they provide that.
So what are the key components of a successful brand? First of all, you have to start with a mission. Secondly, you need to create a culture. This has to be ingrained. It can't be just a JPEG or a logo. Finally, there are some important characteristics to success that we'll talk about at the end. So we're going to walk you through a corporate example as well as some examples from our own lives as to how really this works to creating a successful brand. So let's start with number 1, the mission. So really, what is a mission? What is a mission statement? This is an overarching kind of global, big picture view that encompasses the core values of your organization, in your case, residency. It's big, it's not detailed. Everything that you're going to execute on your plans is going to feed into this mission, but this is not the time where you're going to come up with those details. It should just be reflective of your values, simple, easy to understand. So how do we do this? You want to start by taking an inventory. First of all, who is your target audience? Are you talking about your applicants, your current residents, your faculty, this administration, the C-suite? Who are you really trying to reach? Secondly, what are the core components of your program as it stands? What values do these represent? Keep the values you like, get rid of the ones that you don't. And then finally, you need to think about, are there additional attributes that you need to add in?
So now that you've identified all of these characteristics, you have to turn them into a mission. This is the basic format of any mission statement. My residency's mission is to provide what, for who, through how. And we're going to take a look at some examples of how this is done well. So we're going to start with Patagonia. Patagonia is probably irrefutably an industry leader in branding. And their mission is to build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to an environmental crisis. So the what for Patagonia is they build the best product. Who they're doing that for is actually to serve the environment, which might be what you would have thought when you went and bought a Patagonia jacket. And how they do this is by adjusting their business processes and everything else they do outside of their business to work towards serving the environment. But you don't have to be an industry leader to write a great mission statement. It's really so simple that even some first and second graders can put together a great mission statement. We're first and second grade kiddos that are always learning how to be better at reading, writing, math, and learning about our world so that we can be really smart to have great jobs and meet all of our goals. So does anyone want to volunteer for me in this mission statement, the what for this classroom? You can shout it out. Don't be shy. I see someone mouthing something. But yeah, they want to be really smart, have great jobs, and meet all their goals. That's the what. Who? It's first and second graders. Pretty simple. How are they going to do this? Always learning how to do these subjects better. That's the simple breakdown. But let's bring it back to residency for a second. Raise your hand if you know your residency's mission statement. Oh, I can't even go to the next question. All right, so that's telling. I didn't get any volunteers in the room because the next question, if any of you were bold enough to raise your hand, I was going to have you keep it up if you could recite it. And if you kept it up, you were definitely going to be reciting it for us. But my point being, maybe because it hasn't been well publicized or branded to you, maybe because it's like a long paragraph. But when they're short and simple like this, they can be at the tip of your tongue. They're easily accessible so that you can keep them in your everyday activities and part of your everyday decision making. Have the mission there.
All right. So now that we've talked about what a mission is, now we need to talk about incorporating it into the culture. This is not just a JPEG. This is not just a logo. You need to have every member of your organization live and breathe your missions. So how do you design a culture? How do you incorporate your mission into everyone into your organization? One of the easiest ways to do it is to kind of think in more detail now about your core values and come up with either philosophies or principles of how you want your culture to be. This can be a how-to statement. This can be a code of conduct. But this is really something that everybody in your organization should be able to walk away on the same page. So coming back to Patagonia, these are their 8 philosophies. You can see there's things from design to distribution to marketing to all the way down to the environment, which is a core part of their mission statement. So we're going to take, for an example, number 4, marketing. Many of you probably haven't realized, but Patagonia doesn't actually advertise anywhere except in their catalogs. And often they have ads like this that are a little bit counterintuitive, right? They're telling you not to buy their jacket. It's not a really great way to sell things, right? But this is a reflection of their core values. They want you to be engaged with the environment, to not be consumeristic, and not buy all these things.
So now you have to get this into culture. You have to operationalize the brand is what we call it, so that it's a living piece of culture. And the first step of that is getting buy-in, which is the same as saying, let's have them drink the Kool-Aid. Let's have them believe in this philosophy. And we usually first do this at orientation. Why is it? At orientations, when people start working. And we continue it at office meetings, or in our case, maybe at our weekly conference is a great opportunity to keep reinstilling the ideas of the mission. We might go on special retreats throughout the year. And lastly, it's not just about us and our program knowing and understanding our mission. Everyone we work with has to be on the same page. So in the example of Patagonia, their vendors and suppliers have to believe in the same thing they do, or else Patagonia isn't going to be able to deliver their mission. For us, our co-conspirators are usually the rest of the hospital. We can't provide the patient experience we want unless our ancillary staff is on board with us doing it. In your residency for your PDs, it might be making sure that your non-core faculty are on board with the same mission to provide you, the residents they're still working with, the education that they want you to have. For me, the best example I ever experienced of operationalizing a culture was working at summer camp. And at the summer camp I worked at, we didn't have any rules for employees. We had a canon of ethics. And you could really answer the question about whether something broke a rule or not by deciding whether it supported the canon of ethics or not. And the way we operationalize this is the first session of staff training every year, what every staff member was at, from executive director on down. And we would go through the canon of ethics, and it's summer camp, so it's a little bit kumbaya. One person would stand in front of the group, they would state the ethic, everyone would repeat it back, and then we'd talk about examples. Because what it means to the children always come first to an executive director versus a counselor versus a member of the kitchen staff or the maintenance crew looks a little bit differently, but they're still all working towards the same mission. But it didn't end after this one session. This session was really just the introduction to provide us a language to continue to discuss this throughout the summer. And as we developed new programs and activities, it would go back to this language. And when we give feedback to employees, it would go back to these ideas, how they were meeting them, how they weren't. And I think the evidence for me of how successful this was at operationalizing the brand is I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a staff member, past or present, who couldn't recite these for you. I last worked there 15 years ago, and I can still do it without looking them up on a regular basis. And most people I know still can too.
Great. So the big question now is, how do you operationalize this type of branding at a hospital level? So I'm assuming for you when you started residency, you had residency orientation, maybe all of the interns got together, right? Did you have orientation with any other ancillary staff at that time? Probably, yeah, a couple, yeah. So I think probably the best example of drinking the Kool-Aid and inculcation of this notion is in Northern California. There's the Kaiser hospital system, and they own their own hospitals and they have their own medical staff. And so when my graduates go and work there, their orientation is not just as a physician, but they're in a big room with housekeeping and radiology techs and nurses and cafeteria and physicians. And they literally spend the entire day talking about the mission of Kaiser. And they get up on and they do whiteboards and they session. And it's literally, while they do it, my residents were like, oh my gosh, we had this whole thing. But at the end of the day, everyone said, this is absolutely why we're here. And it really inculcates this notion of sort of stem to stern, top to bottom, all around, sort of everyone shares that same mission. And I was at the IHI meeting last December, and there was a great example of somebody saying that they asked one of the housekeepers, somebody was doing a tour, maybe it was a joint commission or something, and they asked the housekeeper, tell us about your job, what's your main job here? And they said, my job is to save lives. And it was a great representation because they did EVS in the OR, and they felt like cleaning and doing sterilization, that led to saving lives. And that is perhaps as important as physician providers. And if you can get your staff from top to bottom to remember that and from all perspectives, then that goes a long way to proving that you're actually living your mission statement. So right now I also have a position, the dubious position of being chief of staff for the hospital. So I went from residency director of 45 to residency director for 700 now. But what it does though is someone told me a great way to take your mission statement and actually remind everybody, because mostly I have a lot of meetings now, to take your mission statement and start the meetings by giving a case vignette that reminds you of your mission. So my hospital mission is caring, healing, teaching, and serving all. And so we start every board meeting, literally board of trustees and the medical executive committee, with that phrase and say, who has a vignette about our patients to show how this is part of our mission statement. And then you hear this really cool vignette about an interesting infectious disease problem or something from surgery, but it reminds everybody that is our mission. And then the rest of the meeting progresses with everyone thinking about that. And that is a day-to-day example of actually taking your mission statement and reminding yourself before you do your other administrative tasks how to go ahead and move forward with that. All right, so we talked a little bit about mission. We're going to talk some about principles and moving forward now as well in terms of other characteristics for success. First is keep it simple. Be true to yourself. I'm just giving a little foreshadowing here. Building glass house. The devil is in the details. Commitment to focus, and Kaizen and the 5 whys. So keeping it simple. Think about Patagonia. Their mission is to make product with a lot of, really important values built into it. So they don't add things onto their product unless it's necessary. There's no extravagant zipper or bling or anything else unless it actually serves the purpose of being a really good jacket. And that's part of keeping it simple. The extraneous little curly cues and things don't add to the graph itself. It's just a simple graph. You don't necessarily need all the extra stuff if it doesn't contribute to your mission. And also, remember, be true to yourself. You have to stay true to yourself because few people will always be true to you. And the thing that reminds me of this is, about 10 years ago, UCSF was starting their residency program. And Highland is right across the Bay Bridge from UCSF, and we got a lot of our students who went to UCSF, and I talked to the program director about telling the story, and he said it was totally fine. We were really worried about a new program starting up in our geographic area. We're like, oh my goodness, if they're going to take the med students that we were thinking that we were going to get, and it was going to be a recruiting nightmare, and how's that going to work? And it actually turns out that an alumni who was in a different program said, you guys just focus on what you do well. Focus on you as a program, and everything else will fall into place. And now, 10 years later, UCSF is a great program, but they're a very different program from Highland. And that is really cool because it adds perspective and interesting sort of aspects, and there are facilities and there are things that you can get at one program that you might not have at the other program. And so the personalities are very, very different. And that's because we focused on being ourselves. And that's what branding is all about.
So you want to build a glass house, and this is all about transparency. You want to let people see the mission at work. Some places might choose to do this through open office floor plans. The executives aren't hidden in the corner offices. They're working out in the same space as everyone else. You don't have to get rid of the doors and traditional hierarchies, though, to be transparent. You just have to make sure that those decisions that are made behind closed doors get well explained to everyone else so they understand how it did or didn't meet the mission and how that contributed to the decision. And it's important both for the popular decisions, maybe even more so than just the unpopular decisions, because that's how you can see the mission being supported. The devil's in the details. I think by this point in your career, you guys all understand the importance of details. And sort of the visual I want to leave you with is the idea that if you've ever navigated by a compass, if you're 1 degree off and you walk 10 feet, you can probably take 1 step and be where you were supposed to be. But if you're 1 degree off and you walk 3 miles, you're probably about 300 feet from where you're supposed to be, which, depending on your terrain, could mean that between you and the spot you wanted to be was a ridge, a river valley, or maybe even a cliff. And it's going to be very hard to get from where you are back to that spot. And it's just the idea that if you pay attention to the details early, it might seem like a little bit of extra effort that you could cut that corner, but it's going to pay off down the line. And you want to commit to focus. This is about not chasing trends, okay? It's a little bit similar to authenticity, but take, for example, if you're looking for a knife and you have the choice between a Swiss Army knife, just a traditional one, not the one that's up on the screen, and the knife up on the screen. You're always going to pick that kitchen knife. It's a much better knife. If you start adding doodahs to that knife to have it compete with the Swiss Army knife, it's not going to be very good. And similar, if you take a traditional Swiss Army knife and put it up against the one on the screen has so many extra functions that it's probably lost its functionality for almost all of them. It's tried to do too many things all at once, and it's lost its purpose for any single one of them. So you want to commit to being focused to your values.
So the last characteristic for success is the concept of continual improvement. So we've talked a lot about Patagonia. One more mention of another corporation, and that's Toyota. Toyota has been a pioneer in terms of process improvement, lean management, things like that. And the whole idea behind it is that you should always be striving to be better. The only thing that's a problem is if you don't have problems, because then you're stagnant. So this is the concept of Kaizen, always changing, always trying to be better, going for continuous improvement. One of the ways that you can achieve this is a tool, you're sensitive, a tool called the 5 Whys. You guys might be used to doing this if you do a lot of safety work with root cause analyses, but it's a similar concept in all sorts of process improvement. You want to pretend like you're a 7-year-old and you just keep asking why until you get to the root of the problem. So for an example, let's take the question, why would a resident want to come to your program? Okay, so why? Well, because they want to be trained in a supportive environment. They want to have excellence. Well, why is the training excellent? Well, because it's a level 1 trauma center and we have really interesting patients and our faculty are good teachers. Why do we have good teachers? Well, because the department is supportive of them. It's not an overly formal environment. Well, why are the teachers supportive and informal? Because we give them resources. Why do we give them resources? Well, we give them resources because we want to train smart residents, and they need to have well-rounded attendings who want to teach.
All right. So the last concept we're going to talk about is what I like to call microbranding. And we've talked about hospitals and departments and residencies with our examples so far. But really, you can brand or rebrand anything. So you could brand your conference. You could brand a lecture series. You could brand your sim program. I think maybe the most important thing for you guys sitting here right now is what's your chief brand going to be this year? So take a little time, think about that over the weekend. Who are you going to be to everybody else?
All right, so in the final moments, I want everyone to go back to the original exercise and remember those words, or take a look at the list that you made. And just take 30 seconds more, and see if you want to revise those a little bit. Use a bit of the why. Why this? Why this? And why this? Take 30 seconds and see if you can revise and come up with actually a better branding of your own program. Sorry if I ramble. Started a little late. Fifteen more seconds? 15 more seconds? What's that? Right. All right, let's go ahead and bring it back in then. All right, guys. Just to wrap it back up, any examples anyone wants to share about sort of honing in their branding?
Any changes people made?
Again, it's a great concept to just keep focusing on how you'll be remembered, and then just continue to revise that, because that's what you want. You want people to, every time they wake up and look at that picture, or look at the picture of your program, or how you're going to, how you want to represent yourself, then make them think of that.
All right. So what we want you guys to take back to your programs, and really more even into your future careers, is that branding is about creating a set of values and then turning that set of values into a culture. And successful brands are simple, authentic, transparent, detail-oriented, focused on their values, and always striving for improvement. Okay? These are our resources. Thank you guys very much for your attention. If you have any questions, we would love to answer them.
Great, thank you.